Good morning and welcome back to the Turtle Wins the Race Home-Based Business Podcast. My name is Kara Buntin. I've owned a home-based business since 1999, and so that's what we talk about here. And today we're going to be talking about SpaghettiO juice information. And this is a thing on this channel. If you have not heard of SpaghettiO juice information before, you'll see that in the emojis that channel members have, there is a can of SpaghettiO juice. And I'm going to tell the story of how this phrase came to be. But SpaghettiO juice information is basically any information that someone tells you in a very authoritative way. And so you tend to believe them just because they're saying it in a way that doesn't even, make you want to question it. But it's just full of crap. Okay, so the story of SpaghettiO juice is when we first moved here, I had a 1-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a husband who worked about 40 minutes away. So dinner time was always a mess. And I think anybody who has young kids knows that the witching hour, we always refer to the witching hour as about 5 o'clock. It's about the hour before dinner. Everybody's cranky. Everybody's tired. There's a lot going on. And one night, my husband, generally what would happen is I would put the 1-year-old to bed earlier because the 1-year-old wanted to go to sleep. The 4-year-old's ready to stay up all night because that's just the way that had always worked. But I would usually feed them first. And then when my husband got home from work, because he would get home about 6:30, I would have him eat. And, so he ate later than the rest of us. But one night I decided for some reason to make tomato soup and grilled cheese sandwiches for dinner. Now that is kind of a traditional combination. I never made that. It's just not something. I don't eat tomato soup because I think it's nasty. But I decided for some reason to make that for dinner that night. All right. So I said to the 4-year-old, I'm going to put the baby to bed. You wait here for daddy and tell him that his dinner is on the stove when he gets home. All right. So the 4-year-old's watching TV or whatever. I'm upstairs with the baby. I hear my husband come home and I hear him come in and he's talking to the 4-year-old. And suddenly he's thumping up the stairs saying, "What am I supposed to eat?" And I said, "Your dinner is on the stove. It's right there." And meanwhile, he's probably woken the baby up and it made me mad. Right. So he's like, "But is that SpaghettiO juice on the stove? Am I supposed to? I don't understand. What is my dinner? Is that? Are there more SpaghettiOs? Is that? And I'm like, okay, why would I make you SpaghettiOs for dinner? And for those of you who don't know, SpaghettiOs are just like these little rings of pasta that you give to little kids. It's in a can, okay? But I can see that to a 4-year-old who had never seen tomato soup before, when you take all the SpaghettiOs out, the red soup looks like SpaghettiO juice. Okay. So my husband said, I was told that is SpaghettiO juice on the stove and that's my dinner, but I don't understand. And I said, consider the source. You are talking to a 4-year-old, okay, who I would say very authoritatively said, that's SpaghettiO juice. And so my husband believed it. Okay, so the thing about SpaghettiO juice information is that you have to be really careful with it because a lot of people will try to give you SpaghettiO juice information just to get you to shut up or to make you think that they know more than you do, and so you should believe everything else that they say, even if it's SpaghettiO juice information. But it's just not right, and if you stop to think about it, it doesn't make logical sense. And if you think and consider the source, if you think about who's telling you this information, it probably won't make sense. But at the time, it sounds like they know what they're talking about. And you don't consider the source and you think that you're eating SpaghettiO juice when it's really tomato soup. Okay. So my message today, and that's the SpaghettiO juice information thing. So I use that phrase a lot because honestly, there are a lot of people who are telling people exactly what to do to sell things on Etsy or to sell things on a website or how to run a home-based business when they've never run one before. I know a lot of people who have a lot of suggestions for running a home-based business when they've never run a business in their lives, but they seem to know everything because that's what people do, right? So you have to be able to separate the, good advice basically from SpaghettiO juice information. But it's hard to do that because people come across very authoritatively. And I get people constantly sending me messages. I just heard this in a Facebook group. And whenever I get that message, I've said this before, whenever I get a message that starts with, I heard this in another Facebook group, I know it's going to be something dumb. And I know it's going to be bad advice because they're questioning it, right? So if someone says something in a very authoritative way, but you still question it, then there's probably something wrong with that advice. If there's something about it that makes you question it, then it might not be the best it might not be the best rule to follow. Okay. So that kind of stuff is pretty harmless because you can kind of sniff it out. You feel like there's something wrong with this information. It doesn't make logical sense. The person that's telling it to you has said dumb things in the past that didn't make any sense and weren't true. So there's enough things that you can kind of piece together to make that clear to yourself that that's not something you should be doing or listening to or taking to heart as advice in how to run your business. But like I said, the dangerous thing is when someone who you do trust is handing out advice and they've been correct in the past. They kind of have a reputation. They have set themselves up as an authority, and you have no real reason to question what they're saying because they just say it, and it's not something that you really have to question. It just is kind of stated as a fact, and that's it. And meanwhile, it's completely wrong. So that's the most dangerous type of spaghetti juice information, is the kind of completely wrong information that's disguised as something that you shouldn't have to question because it just seems like it's a trivial thing. And I hearken back to the time when I was doing wedding cakes. There was a cake forum that we would go and post questions, and people would talk about designs and that kind of thing. Oh my God, there's always someone who's the queen of the forums, isn't there? There's always someone who must just be sitting on their computer all day answering every question that comes down the pike. The first person to post a response, it's this person. Or they have been on the forum long enough that people are like, well, what does so-and-so think? And then, we're all going to wait to make our judgment until this person shows up. Well, on this cake forum, there was a woman who was the queen of the forum. I'm not going to say her name. I'm not going to say the name of the forum. But she I don't know what she did, but she claimed to have a very successful business, making wedding cakes or whatever she was doing. And she was constantly handing out business advice that was just a little off. And there were a few of us, maybe a group of 5 or 6 other, small business owners who we all did cakes professionally from our homes. And, I think one person actually owned a brick and mortar. So it's not like we didn't know what we were talking about. And we would send each other messages going, what is she talking about? Like, do you guys understand this advice? And we'd be like, no, it doesn't make any sense. It was very strange because she claimed that she had this business that was doing really well, blah, blah, blah. So, of course, we got nosy because she was either handing out advice that was just completely wrong, and these people had no idea because she was the queen of the forum. And so it was like, hey, she's been around for so long, everything she says must be right? No, longevity doesn't mean that everything you say is right. So anyway, so she was either giving out advice that was just completely wrong or just really basic advice. And it wasn't clever. It was just basic advice that she was reading from a textbook somewhere. And it was very confusing because we were like, why don't people see through this? It's very strange. So at some point she said, I'm retiring. And we're like, you're not old enough to retire. Stop. Something's going on. So we got nosy and we started doing some public record digging. Turns out she had filed bankruptcy. And it made sense at that point. That made sense because the advice that she'd been handing out was basically how to drive your business into the ground and how not to make a profit. So you have to be really careful when people hand out spaghetti juice information advice that you're basing your reaction to it on reality and not on their reputation. It's hard. This is a real tough topic because you can't, well, number one, nobody knows everything about everything, right? And so if someone has an answer to everything and they never say, I don't know, or I don't have the answer to that, or you'll have to look that up for yourself, or if they don't refer you to someone else who knows better, right? Be careful. The person that has an answer for everything is the one that you shouldn't trust, because that's impossible. That's just impossible. And if some of the advice that people are handing out, this is a real tough topic. I've seen some things recently in a couple of forums online that I'm sure other Etsy sellers are, in, like, either in contact with these forums or they're, participating in these forums or whatever, that are just wrong. It's just basic wrong information. It's not even advice. It's just wrong information. But there's no way or reason why you would know that it was wrong information, because it's given to you by the queen of the forum or the person that seems to have a lot of information. They never say, I don't know. They're always correcting people. And I'm sure that we all belong, or I don't, but I'm sure that we all belong to Facebook groups, because I don't belong to Facebook groups if I don't have to. But I'm sure that I know that people belong to Facebook groups where there are people handing out really bad Etsy advice, because they send the advice to me and say, what is this true? Is what's going on? And I don't think I've ever, maybe once, I can think once recently I said, well, there is a point to that, but then there's this. The majority of times when people send me that kind of thing, it makes no sense. And it's complete spaghetti-o juice information just said in order to shut them up or to make them quit asking questions. And that's the kind of forum you don't want to be in. You don't want to interact with people who are just handing out bad information. And you don't want to interact with people who don't know the answer. Okay, so if you ever come across someone who you're getting business advice from and they never say, I don't know, don't trust them. That's because there's something along the way that they are not telling you correct, that they are just making it up because they don't want to look like they don't know the answer. Okay, I don't know the answer to everything. And we do the Q&As on this channel on Tuesday. And a lot of times I'll tell people I'm not sure. And I'll say, I don't have experience with that. But then the people in the chat, there's usually someone in the chat who does have experience with whatever I don't have experience with. People have asked me to do tutorials about things that I have no experience about or using whatever software or whatever it is. And I'm not going to do a tutorial about something that I don't know about. But I know that there are plenty of people who do. Okay, so just be careful. I think the whole point of this podcast is you have to be careful. You have to be careful about your finances. You have to be careful about who you believe. You have to be careful about who you work with, And I'm just always telling people to be careful. But this is really kind of important, because just because someone says something in an authoritative way, it doesn't mean it's spaghetti-o juice. Just because you're told by a 4-year-old that it is, you don't have to believe that. You should consider the source, make your own judgments, do a little more research. If something feels a little off to you, or if something is said with such assuredness that there is only one way to do that, and that's what this is. There's more than one way to do anything. Do what you want to do, right? But if someone tells you, you have to do it my way, or it's not ever going to work, well, I would beat a hasty retreat, because that's probably not true. So that's it. If you have any questions or comments, or you have your own spaghetti-o juice information story, post it underneath. And if you are a member of this channel, you can use the spaghetti-o juice emoji during our live Q&As on Tuesday, where I don't know everything and I'll say so. All right, so I'll talk to you guys later. And that's it. I'll see you next week. Bye.